My name is Dr. G. Welcome to That's Unusual, my podcast uncovering the unusual stories behind the world's most interesting people. On this show, we celebrate what makes us different and how we convert those differences into unexpected opportunities. Welcome to this week's episode of That's Unusual. We've got a really cool episode for you today, but before we get started, please go and subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Did you know that only 4% of venture capital funding goes to women entrepreneurs? But did you also know that in 2016, there were over 11.3 million women-owned businesses in the US that employed nearly 9 million people and generated over $1.6 trillion in revenues? So why the big disconnect? But more importantly, what would you do if faced with experiencing this social injustice? Well, in steps Vicki Saunders, my next guest. With her globally recognized company called SheEO, serial entrepreneur Vicki Saunders is on a crusade to disrupt and reimagine the venture funding model for women-led companies around the world using a philosophy she calls radical generosity. How does it work? Well, up to 1,000 women in each region contribute $1,000, which creates a $1 million fund. The money is then loaned out to up to 10 women-led ventures at 0% interest and paid back over 5 years and reinvested perpetually. Yes, you heard that correct, in perpetuity. This is a fund that will keep on giving. Vicki's big picture calculation? $1 billion going to 10,000 female entrepreneurs every year in perpetuity. So take that, Sand Hill Road. On this episode, Vicki shares her purpose-filled journey leading up to this point, why venture capital and traditional funding models have mostly failed women, an inside look at the SheEO strategy, several success stories from her portfolio, and even key principles from her popular book, Think Like a SheEO. As you listen to this episode, I ask that you reflect on your own unusual stories and unique qualities that can help open doors to unexpected opportunities. And so with that, let's get started. Welcome to another episode of That's Unusual. I'm really excited about today's guest, who is doing some fantastic work with her new venture. My guest today is Vicki Saunders. Welcome to the show, Vicki.
Thank you very much.
Now, there's so many things that we can talk about here, but I think the best way to kick things off, and we'll sort of dive deep into some of the various topics, but really if you could just briefly tell us about SheEO, which is your new venture, and then we'll sort of get into some of the specifics around that and some of the backstory.
Sure. So SheEO is, the goal is to radically transform how we support and finance and celebrate female entrepreneurs. 4% of venture capital goes to women innovators. It's been like that for decades, and nothing's changed it. And as a serial entrepreneur who's struggled to get funding along the way, I was like, this problem has just reared its head so many times in my life and with the ventures that I'm mentoring. And I'm like, I have to solve this problem. So we've completely redesigned it. Like if you were starting over again, how would you create a support system for women? And so we've mashed up a whole bunch of different things that are happening in the marketplace, crowdfunding, different kinds of mentorship. And so it's 1,000 women come together, contribute $1,100 each. We create this pool of capital, and then we loan that money to 10 female entrepreneurs that are selected by the women who contribute the money. And they pay it back over 5 years in 20 equal payments. And the money, as it's paid back, gets loaned out again. And our goal is to get to 1 million women contributing $1,100. And we create this perpetual fund of $1 billion that will pass on to our daughters and our granddaughters and our great-granddaughters. So it's like this, yeah.
That it's just so amazing. The first time I heard about it, I was absolutely blown away, and such an important initiative in terms of giving the required and needed support for female founders and female entrepreneurs. And there's a lot of things that we can talk about there, and I want to get into it. But first, getting to know you a little bit. Now, this is not your first rodeo. And, having done some research on your background and picked up your book, a lot of what you do tends to be very deliberate in nature. And you, in fact, even have a series of big questions that you've been looking to solve over the course of your career. So maybe if you could, maybe take us, a little bit on your journey, how you got started. I believe You even have something on your bio that talks about your 7 quests on your journey to SheEO. So maybe tell us about your experiences over the years.
Yeah, I mean, everything really, I, as a kid, was like, how can I have a big positive impact in the world? As far back as I can remember. And part of the thing for me is I wanted to make money and do good in the world. And, 30 plus years ago, 40 years ago, when I was thinking about this stuff, that was not what you did, right? People would be like, don't be ridiculous, Vicki, go make a bunch of money, then give it away. But that just didn't really resonate with me. And so I was always sort of seeking this. And I never thought of being an entrepreneur ever. For whatever reason, it just wasn't cool back then. And I wasn't surrounded by a lot of entrepreneurs. But I had this whole crazy thing happen. I was in Europe trying to decide if I was going to do my PhD. I was thinking maybe academics was a route for me. And the wall fell down in Berlin. And I went, oh my God, history is changing in the moment. And so I got on a train and I went immediately over to Eastern Europe. And I was surrounded by people who were now dreaming about what they were going to do now that they were free. And literally every conversation around me was like, I'm going to do this now that I'm free. I'm going to do that. And I went, oh my God, I'm free too. What am I going to do? And I became an entrepreneur in Prague in 1989 and started an English language school. And then I started this import-export business from India. And I had no idea what I was doing. I just started, And I got into this, I was surrounded by dreamers who were taking action. And that helped me to become a dreamer. And so ever since then, I just kept starting businesses. And I've always been very passionate about this thing that happened to me in Prague. Someone came up to me at an event and said, why are you being a catalyst for entrepreneurship here? I was getting everybody to start businesses. I'm very evangelical about stuff when I find it. And someone said, why are you doing this here instead of in your own country? And I was like, wow, okay, so how would you even start that? How do you, and so that led me to this, how do you create environments where people achieve more than they think is possible for them? How do you do that? And SheEO is very much like that. How do we create an ecosystem to support women to fly to the moon and achieve their dreams? How do we do that? That's been
a common thread throughout your quests.
Every one of my ventures has been trying to solve that problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about some of the early ventures that eventually led you to SheEO.
Yeah. So one of them was called Kids Energy. And we hired teams of 14 to 24-year-olds to solve problems that no one else could figure out in the economy. And the timing of this was around the dot-com time where everyone's kid knew how to reprogram the VCR. No adults did. And just we're growing up digital, right? So we were looking at what does the bank of the future look like? And we'd have teams of young people working on this for the head of knowledge industries at the biggest bank in Canada. And, how do you get kids interested in investing? And what are all of the future business models? And these were projects that teams of young people worked on for us. And then as we introduced them to executives and key players in the market, they started taking all our customers and starting their own businesses. And we spun out 20 plus businesses in just a few short years of young people, getting a bit of experience and going crazy with it. And so then we launched an incubator, one of the first ones in Canada, and started funding their business ideas. And that company went public, called the Energy Group in Toronto. So that was one example. And it was just this, if you create the right sort of space for people to connect with each other and to learn from each other, and then they get connected into the marketplace to key influencers as customers, all this stuff happens early. So,
and is that still operating?
It is various forms of it. The incubator's not. I mean, one of the things that's interesting as you get older in the world is, way back when we had one of these first incubators and then the market crashed and everyone's like, who's going to invest in young, unproven entrepreneurs? What a crazy idea. And here we are 20 years later, and there's 3,400 of these things all over the world.
Yeah.
But, so cycles happen.
Yeah. And so then what next?
And so then I did a software as a service company, which was all around tracking sustainability actions. And this was partly how do you get people to understand that their small actions aggregated together create big impact? How do you do that? And so our first customer was Walmart, which was a really interesting first customer to have for this software. So everyone who worked at Walmart had a personal sustainability plan of what they wanted to do to make an impact in the world. And we were the software that tracked that. And so doing something like that at Walmart is crazy because, one store challenges another store to like lose weight or eat organic or whatever they were doing. And then like the impact is so massive. It's like 32,000 pounds lost this month, across like all the Walmart stores. So that was a really interesting thing. I was trying to see if you could actually experience your collective impact, would that change your behavior? So that was another company that was pretty interesting. And I, along the way.
And that was Zazengo? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes. Yeah, that was Zazengo. And so I think, part of all of these experiences has just been like, there's so much media, we're so globalized, we know what's happening in every part of the world and we're so interconnected. All of the problems seem so big. And people started to like lose their personal efficacy. Like, oh, well, what's it going to matter if I do one thing because this problem's so massive? Mm-hmm. And that, I think about that as like, how can we each feel that we matter and that our actions matter in the world? And everyone talks about, like, I do a lot of meditation and I understand this concept of we're all one. Intellectually, I get that. But, in our actions every day, that's a hard thing to understand. Mm-hmm. That we're all connected.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm mashing together lots of concepts here, but this is one of my strengths in the world is that I am deeply curious about tons of different things. I'm on the advisory board at the Perimeter Institute, which is all about, theoretical and quantum physics. I'm interested in tons of different things, and I synthesize what I learn from different areas in order to kind of create my worldview. And so that for me is like the diversity of interest really helps you to be more creative from my perspective.
I think what's really fascinating and intriguing to me is the fact that you've got such a deliberate sense in terms of how solving for one problem opens up another question about a different problem. And you can sort of see that over the course of your journey, where each new initiative that you essentially tackled raised another big question, right? And so it's how do we collaborate together and use a sense of community to innovate together? Then what's the impact as a result of innovation, and how do we create meaningful impact together? And each one sort of opened a door to your next opportunity. So then how did that end up leading into the development or conceiving the concept of SheEO?
Yeah, well, in fact, it's so awesome when you get older, you kind of go, oh, that's the red thread that pulled through my life. Because, at the moment of execution, you don't always realize that this is following the last thing you did, right? Like, or I didn't anyway. It wasn't this like, here's my 25-year plan and I've got a natural
right.
flow, like I had no idea. I was just following my nose. And so, part of that experience is really interesting. And I have avoided starting SheEO for 25 years. Like that, I never wanted to do anything that was gender focused because I grew up in a family full of boys, surrounded by boys. All of my best friends were boys. And I witnessed what it was like to like call out things that I thought were unfair from this gender perspective, which I recognized very early in my life. I saw that women were treated differently. And I'm like, I want to fly to the moon. I'm not going to call myself out as separate. And so, the fitting in gene was very strong compared to the like standing for what I wanted. I found that tension and for many, many years. And I really thought like for the last couple of decades, my experience has been that being a female entrepreneur, the female part of entrepreneur is a burden, right? Being a woman in business is hard. And there's so many ways that you're not treated fairly. And part of that recognition over time has been like, the whole world is not designed by us. Like we weren't at the table to design this model. And so it's not surprising that 4% of venture capital goes to women or 3% of, creative directors are women. Like there's a challenge there because we didn't co-design this world. And you see that in simple things like, how is it possible that we haven't figured out how to solve childcare? Like this is really not a hard thing to solve, right. But it's just because it's not an issue for the people that were designing things. They're like, yeah, okay, I've got, someone at home taking care of the kids. Why do we have to solve for that?
And it's dizzying the fact that it's, females comprise over 50% of the population, yet they weren't involved with the conceptual design of how we operate as a country, as a sort of unified species. Now, what do you think something like SheEO could have even gotten off the ground 20, 25 years ago? Or do you think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the timing is exactly right?
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the things you learn as an entrepreneur, like timing is everything. Yeah. And the timing for this right now is insane. It's perfect. This is really the moment. And I actually had this idea and not the, what SheEO is, but the name SheEO came to me in 1999, and I created the first business plan competition for women in Canada. And I got 5 women to each write a $50,000 check. We created this $250,000 pool of capital, and we invested in one entrepreneur. And so like the idea was back then, but it just wasn't the right timing. And so I think right now is the moment. And we're also at this like crazy critical stage in the world where pretty much everything's broken, right? Almost everything needs to be redesigned. And so that opportunity to call on the innovations that women have that have been sitting on the sidelines, underfunded, for decades. Like, where are those innovations and how can we find them, support them, and help them grow so that we create a better world for all of us, right? Like version 2.0 of this place better not just be designed by men again. Like that's not going to work. Like we all do better if we design for everybody, from my perspective.
Now, every great entrepreneur also has, a bunch of folks who have inspired them. Who've inspired you along the way?
There's so many different people. I took a year off between companies, and I went around the world and I met all of the people that wrote the incredible books that I loved. And so one of them was Riane Eisler, who is one of the top 10 macro historians of all time. And she's the only one who's living at the moment. She lives in Carmel. I spent a bunch of time with Riane walking along the beach in Carmel, asking her she has this book called The Chalice and the Blade. And it's really about, matrilineal societies that existed before. And the model we have right now isn't the only model. There have been other models. And so she looked back in history and about partnership societies versus dominator sort of focused societies. And so that was fascinating. So that was a piece of the puzzle. There is a woman named Donna Markova who just had such a unique point of view on the world as well, in terms of thinking partnerships and thinking together with others in order to reach your potential. And I spent some time with her. Dee Hock, the founder of Visa, talked about, chaotic societies, a mix of chaos and order, and why the tension between those two creates greatness. So there's a lot of different people out there who are like pieces and, books here and there. Flow by Csikszentmihalyi, that amazing book of flow. So a lot of stuff came from books. And then I reached out and met some of these people. Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Belief. Like I'm just fascinated by energy and fields and quantum physics. Like all of that stuff is kind of where I think we're going next. We're starting to understand what's out there. And so those are some people.
And I love the simplistic way that Justin Trudeau described quantum physics as well in his
wasn't that awesome?
So I'm, a little known fact of myself, I'm actually Canadian born. I was born in Montreal, so I have a little bit of a rooted connection to Canada. Now, you eventually wrote a book of your own called Think Like a SheEO, and I love that title. Now, did that come before you created the venture model of SheEO, or is that something that sort of culminated from your experiences with putting that?
I wrote that book before the concept of radical generosity came up. So throughout the whole book, we don't even mention that. And I was experimenting with how we were going to do this support system while that book was being written. So it was the precursor to this. And really I've been a mentor to over 1,000 entrepreneurs along the way. And I kept finding myself repeating all of this delicious wisdom that I'd gathered from all these people. And I'm like, I got to write this down. Like, so it was a giant brain dump of like everything that I've learned that's helped me so far.
And what did you learn in the process of writing a book?
Well, actually, I innovated how I wrote the book. I wrote it with somebody else, and she actually is a publisher and a coach. And she's one of our SheEO coaches now. She's incredible, Mary Jane Ryan. And she interviewed it out of me. Literally, it was so ready to come out. We sat down and we wrote the chapter headings in under an hour. Like it just was like, here are the parts of the book and here's what needs to come. And then it was just a weaving together of stories. And thank God she's a good editor, because for me, everything sort of connects with one another. So it's hard for me to separate out, like, here's the first message and here's the second message. I'm already like, the first leads to second, leads to the third. And so I would have one giant chapter if I'd written it.
And so as you were writing this book, did that help frame the model that eventually became SheEO?
I don't think writing the book helped to frame the model. For me, words come after experience. And so I have a vision for what I want to get done in the world, but the expressing how that happens, I can only really do after I execute. So,
interesting. So now that SheEO has been, you launched it in 2013, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now that you have, 3 to 4 years under your belt and experiences is what changed your words, is there anything that you would go back and change with the book or your thought process around it?
I think the stuff in the book is great. I mean, there's another book coming, right? I have to just keep writing about this because there's so much more stuff I'm learning. Like it's even like the concept of radical generosity, for example, which is underneath everything we're doing. What does that even mean? Right? Like for me, I was like, what's a way to talk about the culture we're creating with SheEO so that people can understand it? And it needed to be a new word because, the existing words have a bunch of, people think of them in a certain way. And so it was really generous. Like if people were generous with each other, what would that look like if everybody, and then I'm like, that's not going to work because generosity just wasn't an exciting word. I'm like, what if you were radically generous? Then people go, I don't know what that means. And I'm like, perfect. Right. Because it's not just being generous, it's being radically generous. And so I said that word. I didn't define it. I didn't write like a 2-pager on what it means to be radically generous. I just said it's radical generosity, and people make it up as they go. And the concept of radical generosity is actually working on me, and I'm starting to understand what it means. I look at an email that I get from somebody that's kind of crusty, like a little bit of nastiness in the email. And I'll be like, what's the radically generous response to that email? And, with myself, what's the radically generous way I can treat myself today? And, if I was radically generous with others, what would that look like? And as I do that, I'm becoming happier, healthier. I'm like way happier than I was 3 years ago. I'm tending, it's a really interesting thing that's working on me. And I don't know if you've noticed this before, but one of the challenges we have in the world is as soon as you label and define something, it kind of loses its energy. And so by not saying what this means, it's left open for our community to create what it means. And so in 5 years, I'm going to be able to write what it means to be radically generous. But right now, I'm not sure. It's still emerging.
That's fascinating. To some degree, I'm doing that with Unusual as well. I'm sort of letting the community define ultimately what that means. And partly that the word was chosen to sort of instill the sort of eye-catching sense of, well, that word itself is not commonly used, or we don't recognize it in common language, when in fact, if you just, open your ears to everyday conversation, it's amazing the context in which we use that word. So I think it's really cool that you're exploring with the meaning behind radical generosity. You've done that with a couple of different terms and phrases, including, this concept of activators and using sort of a rallying cry around I'm in. So tell us more about, let's dig into the SheEO model, right? Yeah. So it's drastically different from existing ways of funding. Maybe we can get into what we think is first wrong with the existing funding structures and why the SheEO model specifically addresses those gaps.
Yeah. So like the number one thing that, there's mindset problems under everything we're doing. So we have a winner takes all mindset in the world right now. And winner takes all has led us to a place now where 8 people have the same wealth as 3.5 billion people on the planet, right? 8 people have accumulated all of that wealth. And that's the result of winner takes all, right? Like we bet it all on red. We live in this giant casino compared to even 20 years ago. It's just literally like, let's put $100 billion into Uber and have them win the market, right? Yeah. Like that, it's just insane. I think we are so capital inefficient. It makes me crazy. So the winner takes all mindset is a big challenge around that. And so we step back with SheEO and go, we have this $1 million pool of capital that we're going to loan out to 10 female entrepreneurs. And so, the way of doing this and normally would be, it's $1 million prize. One company gets it, bet it all on her, give her support and whatever. With SheEO, we don't. We have picked 10. And then, how does that money get divided? So we turn it over to the ventures. They come together for a 3-day retreat. They meet their coaches who they'll be working with throughout the year. And we say to them, over to you to divide up this money. We're going to leave the room now. You have 2 rules. One is you can't give it all to one venture, winner takes all, and you can't divide it up evenly, which we know women would do if they just became best friends over a couple of days, right? You're like, everybody have $100,000 and we'll go home. Yay, love you. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen because, underneath that, the reason why we're doing that, a couple of things. One is we know that women have a harder time negotiating on their own behalf. So we create a safe space for you to practice that. Like that's one. Another reason we do that is because we know that we need a new model of how to allocate capital for a big impact. And there's no right answer for that. So every time we do this, the ventures come up with a different process on how they're going to figure that out. And they think not only about themselves and what they need for their business, but they also think about the whole and the collective, because we expect 100% payback of this money. So we ask you, don't ask for more than you know that you can pay back. This is just the beginning. You can come back to the well. If you execute well on this, there's a whole network of women that will want to help you get to the next stage.
So right? This is built more off of a loan structure than an equity structure?
Yeah. It's all loans.
It's all loans.
It's built as loans for round one. And then, now most of our companies are raising follow-on rounds, and that goes to the network to offer to them if they'd like to invest for equity or further loans with interest rates, et cetera.
And so what would you consider as qualifying criteria for those women looking to get,
So we have 4 main things. One is you have to be majority woman-owned. You have to be woman-led. You have to have at least 50K in revenue this year, up to a couple million. And you have to be able to answer the question, are you a new model or a new mindset or a new solution for a better world? It's kind of how we frame it. So you have to be able to articulate how you're creating a better world, either through your products or services or how you do business. That's
interesting. Critical. And so what's been the success like?
It's been completely crazy. So we have all of our ventures are well over 100% growth after the first year. They get exactly what they're asking for from our network within 24 hours of the ask. We have a process each month where companies can say, what's your biggest business need? And it goes out in a summarized email to the network of women. And at some point, someone's always paying attention. We have 100-to-1 ratio of our activators, the women who've contributed capital to ventures. So, lots of people are busy, and that's fine. But the ventures it's like an on-demand network. They get what they need right away. So that the network piece is working, the growth in the companies is working. The other thing that's just massive is our ventures have just dramatically increased their confidence and their boldness. So being validated as one of our ventures, Ep032, which is a breathable food wrap, really interesting concept. She's like, being validated by 500 women changed my life. Literally, she stands up taller. She believes in her business so much more because she's had this support. And now, we're becoming her customers and her advisors and making connections for her to build her distribution network around the world. All of that is worth so much more than the low interest loan she got, right? All that other stuff is huge.
Yeah, I'd imagine that the money at this point is just a small piece contributing to the success. It's more of the network the support network being developed for all of these women, which is just simply fantastic. Now, you guys are really hitting, it's not just, you're not necessarily going after what a typical VC would be going after in funding in the first place, right? So a lot of these ventures that you're focusing on tend to be more small business oriented ventures that perhaps, may never grow to be the big multi-billion dollar types of companies, but in fact are the types of companies that make this world go around. Can you share, I know you mentioned one company, can you share some examples of some of the ventures that come through your portfolio? Yeah,
and there's a real range of companies. The thing that we're looking for is selecting companies that are export potential or already exporting, because the idea with SheEO is these, pods of 1,000 people, 1,000 women. Our goal is to get to 1 million women as soon as possible. So that's 1,000 regions around the world connected. So the idea with, Tony's company, Ep032, which is the breathable food wrap, when she wants to go to market, she's based in Victoria, BC. When she wants to go to market in LA or San Francisco or Colorado or Mumbai or Auckland, New Zealand, she plugs into the communities of radically generous women in those communities to take her to market. Right. And so that it's a distribution strategy and a network strategy to grow your business rapidly and get to other markets. So another company is called the Alinker, Alinker. And she has re-envisioned a mobility device for people who start to lose their mobility. She was walking through a park with her mom, and her mom turned and looked at somebody sort of hunched over on a walker and said, "Over my dead body, will I ever use one of those?" And she's a designer. So she redesigned what a device would look like. And it looks like a really cool big yellow bike with, like a tricycle for adults. That's super cool. And you sit at eye level. And so this is one of the things she noticed with wheelchairs or whatever, you're much lower. And so people look down at you, and there's a dignity issue around that. and
true.
like a lack of comfort. And so you're up at the same level as people sitting on this, and you can move it with your feet. And it looks cool and fun. And whenever anybody gets on it, there's a giant smile on their face and they're like taken back to when they were a kid on a tricycle, right? And it's awesome. And so she's just expanding into China. And this, I feel like, actually could be one of those big monster-sized companies. But, she's very intentional about the kinds of people she wants money from. She wants it to be values-based. And she was very excited about our network helping her grow this. So that's another example. We have a technology company, an app for people who live on the autism spectrum to live more independently. And Nadia created this. It's called Magnus Mode. And her brother is autistic, and she created these little card decks for him as a kid on how to brush his teeth, like pick up your toothbrush, get the toothpaste, put the toothpaste on the toothbrush, like all the steps that you need. And she put these into apps and digitized them. And now she's doing these for like how to order a coffee, how to take the subway, how to get into a baseball game, step by step. And they take this app and use it to do this. And she's got corporations funding each of these decks in different sectors. So like just really cool solutions that have scale potential, but they start at this place of like really solving meaningful problems that we have in the world.
These companies sound absolutely fantastic. Now, we know the world of entrepreneurship, there's a huge failure rate in these companies. Are you seeing, as a result of companies coming through the SheEO model, having a higher success rate simply just because of that support network and all of the mentors that are surrounding them?
Yeah, well, so it's a bit early to tell, I would say. I mean, all of our companies seem to be growing well. And, our number one goal is that, you're paying your money back so it flows forward in this perpetual fund. That's important to us. Some businesses, in our network, it's up to you to define success on your own terms. We're not telling everybody they have to grow into something huge. There isn't pressure to do that. When you apply, and we've rethought the application process completely, it's only 11 questions, no pitch decks, no attachments, no jargon. Like, it's really simplified. And we ask you, like, what is your vision for what you want to do with this company? Where do you want it to go? And then, so that up front when you're selecting these companies. And, some people are biased towards growth and huge, and others are like, this is just a really cool thing that needs to exist in the world. And if it's, stays small and they have $5 million in revenue, that's cool. They're creating these jobs and we want this entrepreneur to succeed. So, the other part that's kind of crazy about this is everybody who commits $1,100 gets a vote. So we are trusting the intuition of like 1,000 women instead of putting 5 experts in a room and picking winners. We're trusting the intuition of the whole network to select. So every year I'm like, okay, here we go again. I wonder what people are going to select. It's a little bit crazy from like me being a sort of quote unquote expert person. The logistics are like, just go online and vote. It's cool how we do it. But it's more that, like if you're sitting there in a traditional, like sort of VC or angel mindset, you kind of freak out about our selection process, right? Because you're like, what? Like, what does that person over there know about business? But part of my thing here is like, we're leveraging the buying potential of women. If women in our network are excited about these companies, they will become early customers and they will open up their networks and they will make introductions. And if they don't, those companies will have a harder time. So let's turn it over to what we're all, collectively passionate about. And just that should help the companies fly to the moon.
Yeah. And I feel like some of the best ideas are just right there in front of our eyes. And I feel, to some degree, women have this competitive advantage as female entrepreneurs in the sense that they've got this sort of combinatorial power of, having, empathy beyond what any male would possibly have. Obviously, this is not universal, but they also have the power of observation. You combine just the ability to observe our everyday surroundings, whether it be caring for the family or looking in our local communities and environment and being involved with school, which for the most part, a lot of women tend to take some of the lead role, and combining that with empathy, there are an incredible amount of innovations that can be solved for, problems that can be solved for as a result of this. I mean, this is, I think it's going to open up a tremendous amount of new solutions to even perhaps what we'd consider micro problems that surround us every day. So I think it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, one other thing we've really noticed that I was just spending a weekend with a friend of mine who's designed a really created an amazing company and has a hard time at the moment sort of scaling it And part of the thing that I notice, a lot of female entrepreneurs that have really cool ideas focus on process innovation and not product innovation.
Interesting.
So and that's kind of partly our relational skill set is like we look at places where, within the connective tissue, things aren't as efficient as they could be, and we redesign that. And the challenge in our market is we're looking for like the bright, shiny object, next big thing. It's very product oriented in our venture financing. And it's a little harder to explain process innovation sometimes. Like everything about SheEO is a process innovation, like every part of it, right? Like we've redesigned the process of like every piece. But on top of that, we're kind of like, we're a product too, right? We're like this new model to fund. And so it's trying to find the sweet spot between those two, I think is important.
Yeah. So it seems like every venture that you get into, solves and answers certain questions that you may have, but then also raises new questions in the process, like you were sort of just mentioning. So since the launch of SheEO, what new questions are propping up for you? Or sort of another way to ask that is what has surprised you that you didn't know before since you've launched?
The biggest surprise to me has been how hard it is to get this off the ground, which is, I think, what every entrepreneur always we get like, wow, that's a really cool idea. And then that issue of like writing a check for $1,100 where you don't get your money back is an interesting thing because we don't approach this as philanthropy, right? Like women are not a cause. That's why I don't talk about this as philanthropy. It's some of my male friends are like, this is so crazy. Like you had all these people go to your website and like, put in their credit card for $1,100 and they don't get their money back. And you hadn't done this before. Like, that's amazing. That's really cool that people do that. But also I'm surprised that there aren't more at this stage. So that's been the biggest thing for me. And partly it's because we are in between, like people live in this sort of two-pocketed, very bifurcated world of like, you either do good or you make money. We're still in that world. Like if this money is being loaned out to female entrepreneurs, then why don't I get it back? Right? Like we think very transactionally. Yeah. So I think that the whole transaction piece of like, what do I get for my $1,100? And like, you get the benefit of a fund being there for your daughters and granddaughters. That's what you get. Right. Incredible. So you need to be radically generous to do that. It's a different kind of thing. And so like some of my friends who are very keen on solving this problem of getting money into the hands of female innovators can really only think about it as through the investing lens. So they're like, if I don't get my money back, how's that going to create wealth? Right? Like some people they can't hold the cognitive dissonance of those two things together.
Interesting. So, yeah. But to some degree, you've also kept the threshold, at sort of a reasonable amount. Yeah. I mean,
if we can't find 1 million women out of 7 billion people on the planet to do this, like, wow, I'm going to just go cry in my Cheerios.
Well, I will certainly do my best to help out where I can there. I think it's an incredible initiative. If there is one single piece of advice that you'd give to female entrepreneurs, what would that be?
If you want money, ask for advice. And if you want advice, ask for money.
Interesting.
My number one. I love that one.
I love that. Okay, great. Well, that sort of is a nice segue into going into the Mad Lib fill in the blank rapid fire round. So if you're up for it, we'll jump right into those.
Sure, let's go.
All right, great. So the first one for you is the best piece of advice I ever received was...
If you want money, ask for advice. No, seriously, that like is my number one. Yeah.
Somehow I figured that one was going to pop up. So good. Yeah. I like that one. Okay. Next one is I am most curious about
everything, but particularly quantum physics. Love it.
Huh. Okay. Why the interest in quantum physics?
Because I think this idea of understanding how we're all connected, I think is popping out of that. And what I'm learning from the Perimeter Institute in particular is as we have the Large Hadron Collider out there bringing back all of this data from the universe, the number one thing that Neil Turok, who runs Perimeter Institute, says is everything all of our models are too complex. They need to be simplified. So we have complexified everything.
That's
and
true.
It's much simpler. And so that really resonates with me because I'm always trying to what's the simple answer to this? It's easy to make it hard, but what are the 11 questions we need to ask entrepreneurs? Not the 6 pages of an application. So distilling things into their simplest form to me is fascinating. And that's what I think we're starting to learn in quantum.
Yeah, love that. Okay. So if you could look back in time and what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Well, I would tell my 20-year-old self to breathe and everything's going to work out. But I also know that my 20-year-old self would never have listened to that.
Yeah, easy to say in hindsight.
Yeah.
If you had to write, no, of course you've written a book, but if you had to write a book about yourself, essentially an autobiography, what would the title of the book be?
Everything's broken. What a great time to be alive.
Interesting. Maybe something that you'll eventually work towards to write.
Yeah.
I would love that. Okay, next one for you. If you can invite 3 people over for dinner, dead or alive, who would you invite and what would you want to talk about?
I love this question. And I dig into it. I think like literally my mom who just passed away, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and if I could go back farther, I would just keep adding great-grandmothers all the way back. And I'd love to talk to them about what they would do differently in their lives.
Ah, that would be great.
Yeah, if they were living their life over again, what would they do differently?
Yeah, and just to get the perspective at their different stages of life and sort of over the course of time. All right, next one and last one for you. So on this podcast, we like to celebrate all of those things that make us unique, those things that make us different, and we call that unusual. So how would you fill in the following blank? I'm unusual because?
Because I believe anything is possible.
Great. Perfect way to sort of end this conversation. Vicki, such a delight getting to know you. And thank you so much for joining us in this podcast. Before we wrap up here, if those listening wanted to learn more about you, get a copy of your book, find out about SheEO, where would you direct them to go?
Yeah, we go to our website, SheEO.world. That's SheEO.world.
Okay. And from there, they can just dig in and find information on you and your book as well?
Yeah, everything is up on the website.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for being on the show, Vicki. It was a delight talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Hi again. It's me, Dr. G. If you are still listening, I'm hoping it's because you enjoyed this podcast. If you would like to hear future episodes, you could really help me out by subscribing to the That's Unusual podcast on iTunes and leaving a review. It goes a long way in helping me get the word out from avid listeners like you. As a thank you, I will be selecting one new reviewer each week at random for a free private 15-minute phone conversation where you can ask me anything and get professional advice on your career or business to help you stand out and make a difference. Also, if you want to be notified of any future episodes, please visit that'sunusualpodcast.com and sign up to receive updates on new episode releases. Until next time, remember to always think unusual.